Welcome, Alphas. Today, we're going to do an interview style of an episode. I chose this episode because I feel like in the world that we live in 2023, we have a lack of male role models, and I think that's an issue. People ask me all the time, how do I end up with this alpha mindset? And I always want to tell them that it's my father that gave this mindset to me, and I think with this interview, my mission is to try to help younger men than me, men of my age, people in general that are just feeling lost, how to deal with failure and how to have a strong mindset, what I would consider an alpha mindset. So without further ado, I'm Dat Dude Dro, as always, the top alpha. Today I have my father. I'd like to introduce you. Before you start, I would like to tell you that you are my superhero. You're the person that makes me strive to be the best that I am. And I hope that I can either be the same man that you are or just a little bit better if at the end of the day. So please introduce yourself.
Well, first of all, Alex, thank you for having me visit with you. As you mentioned, my name is Pedro Antonio Cartagena. I was born in Puerto Rico in a place called Orocovis, which is exactly the middle of the island. Today, where I was born, is actually a natural forest site run by the National Forestry of the United States. And my family was moved to Bayamon, Puerto Rico, the San Juan area, where mom married my dad. And my dad was in the Army. And so we lived in Puerto Rico for a little while. Then we moved to California, to the Mojave Desert. For a number of years, we lived there in the desert. My dad was in armor types, tanks and things like that. And we were there for a little while. My dad was assigned to go to Korea, and we returned to Puerto Rico. From there, I went to Columbus, Georgia. And the reason I gave you that background is because in Columbus, Georgia, I went to high school and I joined the Navy under a program called the Sea Cadets. And so the Sea Cadets allow you to be in high school while you're in the Navy. And actually, it recruits you to go into the Navy right after you graduate. Upon graduation, I married my wife, my first wife, and from there we went to California, to San Diego, where I went to school. First, when I was first assigned to the Navy, I was a pharmacist, and after that, that job closed out, and they made us hospital corpsman. And within that, the hospital corpsman rate, I became a dental technician. Specifically, I was a dental technician that dealt with making prostheses. And I worked in that area for about 10 years or so. And after the military, I retired and became a principal. As I mentioned, I was in the Navy under the Sea Cadets. Part of that was a program called the Navy Campus for Education. And so throughout my career, I was able to go to school and get my education. And completing that education and retiring, I went to school and became a principal. And I retired about 5 years ago.
Okay. Well, thank you for the introduction. So with the intro of this episode, I found some information that kind of stood out to me and encouraged me to make this interview with you. So I would start off by saying these are roughly not exact stats, but I'm going to start off by saying when I heard this, it made me had to pause. So 80% of incarcerated men are fatherless. 80% of the suicides in America are males. And men today have, in general, 35% less testosterone than the men that were born in the generation of my father. So with that all said, I like to go through your timeline because I feel like the one thing that has always inspired me is your mindset of never giving up. And the things that I've seen you go through personally have shaped me as a man and as a leader and as a human being, essentially. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna start off everything by talking about my life lessons that you taught me, and then we're gonna correlate that with your timeline and how you first found yourself in that situation, and how that implemented that into my life, and how you going through those experiences allowed me to become stronger as a man because I had a role model that was in front of me continuously doing X, Y, and Z. And without further ado, let's just go ahead and start. The first life lesson that you taught me: don't live check to check. Would you please tell the audience about your childhood? What was it like day to day, and the things that you saw that were negative and positive, and the things that stuck with you for mostly your whole entire life?
Well, as I was growing up, I come from a very, very poor family. And of course, a lot of the places that I frequented were people that had a few things to survive. And one of the most prevalent things that I noticed about that was that most of those families didn't have a male role at home. There were maybe a woman and children, but there was no father. So that actually had a big impact on me because I've had a role model most of my life, even though my dad was in the military as a career person, and he was away a lot of times. At the beginning of my life, I had my grandfather as a role model. And he actually had a great impact on me. One example is that he only had a third grade education, but he was able, with that level of education, actually achieve a lot of greatness in him. One of the things that he's always shared with me was at the time in the 60s, there was this American person called Martin Luther King. And even though we were in Puerto Rico and there were not a lot of news or things that would tell us about Martin Luther King, the papers did that. They had a lot of articles on him. And so I would read the articles to my grandfather because they were in English in what the paper was called, the San Juan Star. And so I would read it to him, and then he would have that conversation with me. So, through him, I learned some things about being a human being and sharing with other people. And again, some of the plight of the people that were in the United States that were not able to do things. And a lot of things that he told me was actually related to the things that I had observed. Parents who were single parents and parents that families had been broken. And so that was a big thing. Family was a big issue for us. That granddad always talked about family and keeping the family together. And so did my dad. So when my dad came, my dad also was big on family. And, he always shared with us as much as he could within stations. But, we always had that support. And I knew what that support was like. And having observed other people who didn't have that made me think about the family. And again, in the military, that is hard to do, but it was great that Dad shared whatever he could with me as a father, and also my grandfather.
Do you feel that if you didn't have the role model while your father was away, would that have impacted you negatively, would you say?
Yes, I think that, Dad shared some of the things that were what being a man was about, and he was very specific about making sure that the family was the main goal, to keep the family together. And this actually it was difficult for me because later on in life it actually posed some dilemmas for me. And as we, we'll talk about as we go on. But again, family was important in that notion, and Dad and Granddad always sort of share that with me.
All right, so this brings me to my next life lesson. Make sure you know who you marry / have kids with, and they have the same goals, life goals. Why did you want to get married? And at what age did you get married?
Well, I got married at age 17. As I mentioned, I was in the Navy Sea Cadets. And I was just getting ready to go active duty. And as soon as I finished the high school at 17, I actually joined the Navy. I married in March and joined the Navy in June. And we both together moved to San Diego, California, where we lived. And I went to A school and for being a dental technician, prosthetics. And my wife worked, and we were doing real well. In fact, under the Navy campus program, I was going to school, and so the family was going pretty good. It was hard for all of us because I would work during the day for 8 hours, and then I would come home maybe for an hour or two, and I would share with my kids and my wife. And then from that, I went to school for 3 hours. And coming back real late at night, just basically taking a shower and going to bed, and getting up real early in the morning, going to my Navy job. And again, continuing that routine. And for the family, that was very hard to do, both because school was very expensive and also because of the hours that I was spending away. One of the things that I did during that time as I was acquiring my education was to share with my children. Sometimes I'd actually take them with me to school, which they enjoyed quite a bit, but it's hard because kids, they like to play around. It's very hard to keep them in a classroom. So, but they actually experienced that with me, and I wanted them to know that it was expected that they would be going to higher education after high school. And so that the time that I was with them, that conversation was going on, and they could see why it was important by seeing what campus life was like. And so we worked and lived in San Diego for about 4 or 5 years. Before I was getting, I received orders to move overseas to Japan.
All right. Thanks for the long answer. Do you think that you? All right. Let me rephrase this. Did you have kids before you got married or after you got married?
Actually, I got married at 17, but my first son, Raphael, didn't come till 5 years later, because again, I was going to school, and I was trying to advance that as much as I could while I was stationed ashore, because part being in the Navy is being at sea. So I knew that once my shore duty was finished, I would go to sea. So I spent that time going to school. And one of the things that made it hard for us at that time when we didn't even have kids was, the goal of having a higher education was mine, but really my first wife did not share in that dream. So that was hard, because it was hard to sell it to her. And that's one of the reasons I was trying to get the kids in when they were old enough for me to take them, so that they could see that there was some exciting things around that. But my wife never shared that. That was a difficult situation for me. But again, working together, we tried to keep the family together as much as could.
What do you believe are things that a man should provide or a husband should provide while in marriage?
A husband should bring, first of all, love, caring, and a peaceful atmosphere. But the husband should provide for the family. Not to say that the husband only could provide, but I think that both husband and wife should work together. But the husband should ensure that they have enough to make sure that the family can work well and be ready for the future. The husband should bring models to the kids as to what to do and how to act in a civilized world. To share with them what is goals that are good and that can be realized. But always trying to share with the family what your goals are and what the family's goals are and how to act within the society that you're in. So basically, act as sort of like the leader of the family. But again, also the wife should share with that. But I think that the husband brings the model of what behaviors is expected as far as male and females are concerned in the family.
What are things that you're looking for at this time in your life for a partner?
At the beginning, I was looking for a woman that was easy on the eyes. Obviously, being in high school, you look for that what we call a babe, and not so much. Education wasn't that important to me at that time. So, we both were coming right out of high school. We really didn't know that much about the world. We just initiated life with attraction, just basically with attraction, and that's about it. But I think in a marriage you need to go beyond that.
All right, so what you just said, looking back at the situation, what would you think about it looking now? Maybe not so much like a bad or a negative thing, but overall, what would you kind of take away from that situation?
Well, looking back, I would actually change a lot. One of the things that I would change is that you have to find somebody who has a mutual goal with you. In this case, my goal was education, and so I would look for a female that actually is educated, that can handle herself in ways that are important in society, and that can help the children to get a better education themselves, and that is capable of sharing with you in a way that you both have equality, but that each one has a something to contribute to the marriage, but always toward a mutual goal. Working together is very important. At the beginning, that was not that important, but now with experience, I know that probably it is more important than looking for somebody who's easy on the eyes. And again, there has to be some attraction, obviously. But the thing is, the essence is that it's a person who is educated enough to understand the responsibilities that they have, and that is working mutually with the father and together going toward a goal.
This brings me to my next life lesson. Have a process for anything and everything, but be adaptive. Which brings me to the next point in your timeline. You joined the military. Why the military, and why the Navy?
I joined the military because I was looking for a way to sustain and looking for education. As I mentioned, I joined the Sea Cadets and joined that Navy campus for education. So when I didn't know about that, and so I was looking at the Air Force and the Navy because they was the most technological areas of the armed forces. And so I chose the Navy because, first of all, I like the sea. I like to be at sea. And there was a lot of role models when I was growing up in San Juan. There's a lot of Navy guys around because we were very close to the naval base. And so they actually showed me some of the things that were available through the Navy. So I joined the Navy, and because it actually provided for me the areas that I wanted to go into, which was medicine.
What did you learn from the military Navy that you took for life that helped you a lot?
Well, one of the things that I learned, especially when I went to the Navy schools do not permit you to fail. Even if you have to repeat the course over and over and over, they do not let you go. So what happens is, while most military people finish the course the first time, it kind of puts into you the mentality that we don't quit, we don't give up, no matter how bad the situation is. We keep moving and working at it until it's done. Everything that I did in the military was that way. The Navy, and every time shows you, first of all, it shows you a procedure, which you asked me for. It shows you a process that works. And so when you learn to create processes, systems that work, little parts that come together and form that process, it helps you to solve problems. It helps you to overcome obstacles, and maintains you going toward a goal.
Can you please speak about how the Navy helped you with visualization as a tool to succeed?
Yeah, the Navy helps you to create a goal, and they teach you to sort of see that goal already realized and to work toward that goal. Identify the steps that lead you to it. And as you do that, once you get close to that goal, then you visualize the next step. Where does that goal open up? What doors are open so that you can go to the next level? And so you start incrementing some of the steps for the next level. And so you're constantly doing that. But as you do that, you create a more global vision of where you need to go and how things might work. Again, creating that procedure that leads you to go to there. So visualization is very important. Just like an athlete visualizing, for example, a basketball player that they make the hoop all the time, 100%. When you go to the game, it just becomes an automatic because you've already visualized what's going to happen. And so that's why visualization is good. And actually the Navy helped me to do that, to create that vision of the world and goals that are in front of me and how to get to those goals.
Would you recommend the Navy for anyone thinking of joining?
Yes. For me, all the armed forces are good. They actually show you to be organized, to be disciplined in what you do, which is one of the things that actually allows you to create a procedure, because you have to be disciplined enough to identify what is it that works and to keep doing it exactly how you visualized it every single time. So it is for me, the Navy was good in doing that because they have a lot of opportunities for you to learn new technology, new systems, and see the old systems working with the new systems because they go side by side. So you get a broader look of technology. So I recommend that highly because I think in the future technology it's a mainstay now, but it's even going to be more so in the future because we're going to become more and more technologically in society.
Why didn't you want me to join?
I didn't want you to join because I saw that your opportunities for education, as I mentioned, I came from a very poor family. So the opportunities for my family to pay for me to go to college were not there. But your opportunities to go to college and to go beyond what I was achieving were there. So I wanted you to have the opportunity to go to college without any obligations, to go to first the bachelor's degree, to the master's degree, and even beyond, but always looking for better opportunities that had nothing to do with the military, because for me, it was very difficult working 8 hours and going to school. I wanted you to have full-time school availability so that you can do better and learn whatever craft you decided to do on your own.
All right, so my final question for this section is, can you please tell the audience your rank and rate and your position that you left the Navy with?
Yes, I left the Navy as a Master Chief, specifically a Master Chief in the dental technician rate. At the time that I left the Navy, Navy-wide, there was only 9 Master Chiefs in the dental technician rate. And so that made it very unique. And even for chiefs, only 2% of the Navy makes Master Chief. So it actually was a highlight of my life. It was a great achievement. And it's a difficult achievement, by the way, to acquire. I was very proud of that. That was probably one of the best achievements that I can ever think of making.
So my next life lesson that you taught me is, you can show up, but if you don't do the work, it won't matter. Why is education so important to you?
Education is important because it allows you to know what you don't know. And it actually guides you to try to improve yourself continually. Continuous education, continual improvement is important, because one of the things that is happening right now is that, people try to pull people into doing things. You can't do that. You have to actually work with people and communicate with people. One of the things that we see today is the social media. A lot of people are dedicated to hearing things, reading things, but they don't interact. When you're in education, you go in a classroom, you interact with other people, you exchange ideas. And the exchange of ideas is great because it actually helps you to formulate and visualize something different by bringing all those experiences together. And you can only get that through education. You can't get it on your own. But education helps you to be open and broaden your perspective on life.
All right, so like I said, we're going to go through this in a timeline of your life. So you're going through childhood, you've gotten married, you're also in the military, you have children. You spoke briefly about how hectic your life is. At this moment, you're married. Like I said, you're in the Navy, you have kids. How's your day-to-day life right now? And what does it look like with your workload and all that stuff?
It is pretty complicated, again, because of the 8 hours of work. Then you have to, come home, be with your kids for a little bit, and then go for 3 or 4 hours of school. Plus the work that comes afterwards. You got to do homework, you got to do reading, you got to do things that are not normal to a regular routine. And so that puts a lot of pressure, stress. It's a very stressful situation. For me, it was a very stressful time.
So, you said it was very stressful. What is your motivation, desire? What keeps on pushing you to keep on going forward, even though that you're stressed out and everything just seems too much, essentially?
Well, what keeps me, first of all, is because, I learned to keep a goal. My goal was to reach the education levels that I wanted to, but also to seek a better life for my family. Not just the education. The education was a vehicle to get to where I wanted to go and be successful in life and bring that success to my family. So that was what kept me going, even through that stressful time.
As we continue through your timeline, My next life lesson that you taught me is life is going to keep happening. The tough get tougher. Divorce. You're finding out you're getting divorced. Why?
Well, as I mentioned, it was stressful going to school and working at the same time. But one of the main things that I had noticed during, as we were going through that evolution, my wife and I, is that we were drifting apart, both going different directions. Obviously, the education goal was not there for my first wife. And so after a while, we just basically, two people drifting in two different boats going apart. And so we decided to, as hard as it was for the family, because I mentioned I wanted to keep the family intact as much as I can. I went on and decided that I can move on to something else and be successful, and my wife could move on to something else and be successful.
What was it like going through this experience? What age are you at this time right now?
I'm actually 26, 27. It was a difficult time because I was getting to the culmination of my education, and actually I was in this. This was happening in December, and actually I just received orders to go to Japan at the end of January, and so one of the things that put pressure on me was that my goal was almost realized, but not really, because I still were missing 7 credits. And so the only alternative for me to do that was to get the winter semester done, do the seminar. But the school prohibited anybody from taking more than 6 credits during the break. In fact, they wanted you to take 3 only, because it's 6 credits. It's very stressful, and so you had to get special permission to do that.
All right, so what was the relationship with your kids at this moment?
Actually, the kids were great. They were very supportive of me, of what I was doing. They were young and they didn't, but one of the things that I had to do when the decision came to divorce was to communicate with my children what was going on or what was about to happen. Because it's important. The children, when something like a divorce happens, they tend to think that it's something that they did. So I wanted them to know that that was the first thing that I communicated, that I didn't have to do anything with them. But again, I explained to them what I was doing, that I was going to take them to New York, where my soon-to-be ex-wife wanted to go to. And so I traveled with them and my wife to New York.
Okay, so I call it the airplane story. I would consider this one of the most lowest moments in your life throughout your timeline. Can you please tell the audience about your story, which I call the airplane story?
Yeah, it was a difficult time for me. But the idea was that I had to drive them from San Diego to New York and then return to San Diego. That was a very difficult time for me, because it was painful to do that and to return to the house by myself. And one of the things that happened was that I was in the house by myself after returning from New York, feeling very distraught, very destroyed. And I didn't know what my future was going to be like. I didn't think I could continue on, and especially because I knew that not only had I failed in my goal to get my bachelor's degree, because I still had the 7 credits left that I needed to take, and I couldn't take them over the winter time. But something extraordinary happened the next day, is that my mentor at the school, his name was Professor Moriarty. He found out about that. And he actually came to me the next day. I don't know why the next day or how it happened, but he came. And he told me that he had heard what had happened, and that he heard that I wasn't going to return to school because I didn't have funding. And so he said, don't worry about that. Let's go talk to the dean, and let's make the arrangements for you to finish your bachelor's degree. And I'll pay for the credits. But we still have the battle of getting the dean to approve this. And so when we went to see the dean together, the dean said, well, you know, we don't have any courses that allow you to take 7 credits. And so you would have to take more than 3 credits and more than 6. And that's not permitted by the school. So obviously that's a very difficult thing to do. So Moriarty suggested, well, why don't we take the 2 courses that are 6 credits, and let him do a music course that for 1 credit. And so the dean said it's very difficult because in one of the courses that you were suggesting, he has to read 15 books, and the other one he has to learn about appreciating music, but he has to do recognizing music by just listening to it and then determining what kind of. It's very difficult. It's because it's a very intense course. And the last one is the music course that you're suggesting. He has to learn an instrument and then perform that instrument with 1 piece for an audience of people who give him the grade. And he must get a grade of A in order to pass that course. And so he says those are very tall orders. It's hard to do. But in any case, he allowed it. You know, I agreed that I would do it, and I went on to do that. And lo and behold, I did finish the readings, and I did finish the music appreciation course, and I did the presentation to learn to play the guitar and do one particular piece, which was very difficult because I didn't have the skills in there. But I did. I actually had a tremendous professor that showed me how to dominate the guitar and taught me the music at the same time. And so it actually helped me because it actually gave me like a tremendous boost in confidence. I had never experienced that before. Because I finished the course. I'll be honest with you, if you ask me how I did it, I don't know. I just knew that I had so much interest in doing that I dedicated all the energy that I had. And then again, the other thing was that at the end of the 3 weeks, I was handed my diploma. That is amazing. That was sort of, even though it was just a letter saying that I finished my bachelor's degree, it actually gave me the biggest boost that I've ever received in confidence. And so I went to Japan, and I was feeling like I could beat the whole world if I had to. And so I was in a high note when I went to Japan, and Japan was good, but then something else happened at the end.
Do you believe that people come into your life, not just you, but I mean like in general, people's lives, that help them put them in the right direction, like Mr. Moriarty?
Yes. Not only Mr. Moriarty, in my case, Moriarty was a key person, because had he not taken the time to do that, I mean, he didn't have to do that as a professor. Yes, he was my mentor, but again, something he saw in me that I didn't see myself, and he was good enough to come back and actually pay for my course. And I'm going to tell you, the courses were very expensive. But the other thing is, even in Japan, as I was in Japan, finishing that tour, my dad actually had a stroke, and he was dying. So at the end of my tour in Japan, my contract in the Navy was coming up to end my tour. And I received orders to Keflavik, Iceland, and I called the person who writes the orders and said, no, I want to go to Puerto Rico. And he told me there are no positions in Puerto Rico. There's only one position open. And so I said, well, my time in the Navy comes to an end at the time of this particular tour. So I'm going to get out of the Navy. And he told me, you know, you're just going to hit 10 and a half years in Navy. How come you're going to go off when you have more than half already completed? I said, I'm going to do it because I want to go and be with my mom and my family when my dad dies so that I can help them through that process. And I returned home after leaving the Navy. And lo and behold, one day I was at home, and here comes this chief by the name of Sanchez. He's the recruiter from San Juan. And he said, I have orders from a commander, Skip Mills, and Master Chief Stenner to come get you and take you to the base of Roosevelt Roads, Puerto Rico, where you're going to be stationed. And all you have to do is resign and come back in the Navy. And again, I was surprised because Skip Mills and Master Chief Stenner were two people that I worked for some years back. But they saw something in me that made them come together and do whatever they need to do to get me to Roosevelt Roads, Puerto Rico, allowing me to be with my father on his last few days to help my mom and actually continue. But more than that is that as I came back in the Navy, when I left the Navy, I was an E6. And lo and behold, while I was returning, I was selected to be E7, which is a hallmark in the Navy to become a chief. And again, this is another boost in my morale and my confidence because it showed me that you know, something that I had done actually worked to impress other people to be able to help me. And they were good enough to come back and help me and supported me through that process.
Would you say that, you spoke briefly about how Master Chief Stenner and Skip Mills remembered you. Do you believe that your work ethic was one of those things that stood out from other people?
Yes, I wouldn't call it work ethic. I think that they saw that one of the things that I've always believed in is whatever job you're doing, whether you're picking up trash or you're building a building or whatever you're doing, you do it to the best of your ability. And every job that I did for these two people, I believe that they saw that I worked, and I actually did, in my view, I did those extra things that people don't normally do. I identified, again, because I learned to do the process. I identified the process and identified the things that were just enough to get it there, but I tried to do the little nice things that make it a little bit better for not just the project, but for the people that were involved in that project, to make sure that everybody worked together to accomplish the mission. And I think they saw that, and that's one of the things that actually I think made them move in that way to help me, to get me back in the Navy, and actually, again, allowing me to complete my naval career all the way to Master Chief.
All right, so at this point in your life, you've already been married, you've been divorced, you're in the military, you came out, you came back in, you've already ranked up to Master Chief. We're gonna skip a little bit of your timeline because I'm just gonna say nothing bad happens. So we're in graduate school now. How many years is that actually from the time that you joined, coming back from Japan, and then you find yourself in graduate school in Puerto Rico?
Well, actually, when I went back to Roosevelt Roads after my dad passed, I returned to school under the Navy's Campus for Education program, and actually finished my master's degree while I was in Puerto Rico, at the University of Puerto Rico. So that was another event that actually was a result of that, of returning to the Navy, because the Navy paid for that degree. And so I was able to finish that, and immediately upon finishing that, I was actually sent to a place called the Navy School of Work Study. And I became sort of an analyst that looks at work and identifies how work is done. What are the different details that a person uses in any job, and identify different jobs. And so working there, one of the things that I actually learned from that experience is not only how to analyze work and create better procedures, but the other thing is to work smarter, not harder. And so one of the things that as an analyst I learned is how to identify the different details that make up a process, and then identify the places that there are barriers or ways that can be improved around it. Again, going back to the question that you asked earlier, what made me finish projects or not give up? It's because of that. It's because of the process that they show me.
All right, so you're at the you're in the University of Puerto Rico. You're out and about, and you find yourself attracted to your future next wife. What is it about her that attracted you in the first place?
Well, it was a funny story because it was the first day of the graduate school, and we were enrolling into the different courses, and she was there with a group of young ladies, and all of a sudden I noticed that I didn't have a pen or pencil. So I approached the group and asked if she had a pencil. And at first she was very upset. She says, you know, you come to enrollment, you don't have a pen or a pencil to write with. What did you expect to do? So, but in any case, she did give me the pencil. And then lo and behold, we had the conversation about enrollment, and she was helping me through enrollment because she had been at the school before from a couple of years already. And so she said to me, you know, one of the problems that she had was that we had to get these books on that day for the courses, and she left her money at home. And so she was afraid that the books would go away to other people, and then she wouldn't have a book. And so I said, well, look, the problem is I have a check, but I don't have money. So we are going to have to go to some kind of ATM or something to get money. And we went to the naval base, and I was able to cash a check and come back, and we bought the books for both of us. And so after that, then she said, well, then whenever you get a chance, please come meet my family, and I'll reimburse you for the books. But in that situation, I visited her and continued to visit her until, you know, we hit it off. She was very smart young lady, very sharp, very easy on the eyes, and so we just hit it together. And lo and behold, a year after my dad had passed away, we actually married on the same day. Actually, my dad died. In order to make that day, which was very emotionally disturbing to me, a good day. And so we've been together ever since.
How many years now? Before you even answer that question, I want everyone that's watching right now, there's no excuse why you can't go and get a girlfriend or at least a date, because he just used, can I have a pencil? That is like the most simplest pickup line I've ever heard in my life, and it turned into his next wife. So how many years have you been married
40
now?
years. 40 years.
How many?
40 years.
Okay. And does she complete you?
Yes, she does. She's smart, and she's a detail person. So I'm a procedure person. So we kind of complement each other because I see the big picture, and I know the processes to go there, and she actually knows the details of those steps. Which is really where everything gets done. You know, I know the steps, but she knows the details of the steps. And so with that together, we're able to meet goals, and we've had a good journey together for those 40 years.
All right, so after all these 40 happily married years, what advice would you have to married couples, people that are in just, regular relationships or looking to get married?
Well, the first thing that I tell you and I tell anybody is that the first thing that makes everything work is love. Material things are essential to doing things, but in the bottom line is love is what makes things go right. So when you are in love with each other and you understand each other well, and you understand what I mean, understand is by being able to communicate, to work together, to work towards a similar goal, a mutual goal, and to help each other when you struggle, because you're going to struggle. The idea is to communicate in such a way that when the other person's struggling, you carry them, and when you're struggling, they carry you. That's the essence for that. So, but it all revolves around that having love for each other, because what makes people do things for other people is not obligation, responsibility. It's really a love for that other person.
So you spoke on it briefly, but in this timeline of your life, after you meet your wife, my mom, your father dies. Would you consider this one of the most lowest points in your life?
Yes, it was very difficult for me to work with that void, because Dad had always been, as I mentioned, the head of the family. He's always been like the glue that kept it together. He was a good communicator. That was one of the things. He's a strong person, but he communicated really well with us, and that's one of the things that I learned. As I mentioned before, when I was getting divorced, one of the main things that I knew I had to do was to communicate with my children what was going on, so they would understand it, and so they would understand that they had nothing to do with it, that it wasn't their fault or anything like that. It was just that we, as adults, had agreed that it was best for us to do that. But in essence, divorce was very difficult for me because I was the first one to divorce in my family. And so that was sort of like a taboo in my family. And it was very difficult to deal not only with the divorce issue, but also with the family, who actually rejected that idea. But when my dad died, I felt that I was missing someone that I could talk to and get advice from, because he was that role model that I always looked to try to get to where I was going. And he wasn't there anymore, so it was very difficult for me. But I had to be strong, because I had to support the family and bring everybody together after that event. So I had to play up that I wasn't really falling apart, but I was.
Would you consider that being a part of a man?
Yeah, sometimes you have to look beyond you, and so that the others can come together. Again, you do that because you love everybody, and you want to make sure that they don't see you faltering, because if you falter, they're going to falter. And so it makes it difficult for the family to survive if everybody falls apart.
So you're going through your day-to-day. What are your emotions like, knowing that now you can't have that person that you go to every time that you need that kind of advice? What is in your head?
Well, you try to look for other venues that you can use to get to that point. And one of the venues might be a friend or another family member. In this case, my grandfather, as I mentioned before, he was still there. He was still around. He took some of that void. But again, it was very difficult because my grandfather was, by this time, had moved away. So I had to actually travel to see him. But Dad used to be at home every day. I used to see him and talk to him all the time. But again, there was still somebody there to actually carry me through that point. And then when I met your mom, then she took up some of that void, and again, we moved together toward a goal.
What were the things that your father taught you that stick with you today when you first think about your dad?
The notion of doing things because you love the other person, not because you have to do it. It's like a father-son relationship. You don't have to feel, I'm the dad, you're the son, you're going to have to do this because I said so. What really permeates that in a better way is to show caring for each other. And when you care for each other, you talk to each other, you consider the other person's views and opinions, and you weigh that up, and you compromise a little bit to make sure that you both achieve what you're trying to achieve, but without overwhelming each other. That's a hard thing to do. I learned that from my dad, to compromise, to communicate well, so that you can reach that mutual goal.
For our audience, would you be able to describe your father briefly?
Yeah, my dad was a bodybuilder. He was 6'5", and he was, how can I say, he was a person that was pretty strong in character. He had some strong beliefs. As I mentioned, one of them was family. The other is that you always work toward the goal that you have, and to do that particular job the best way you can. In fact, one of the rules that he had as I was growing up was that every summer you have to have a job, a different job, so that you learn different things. And what that does is it allows you to have a feel for what other people do and how difficult it might be, so that you don't misuse them in a way. And actually that makes you understand people a little bit better.
So you briefly spoke on this, but you decided to marry your wife 1 year later after your father's death in the month of December, same month that he passed away. Can you please tell the audience a little bit more why, I guess more than just, because I don't want to be sad, I want to be happy over sad, but can you just describe that a little bit?
It's just a difficult time. Christmas is a very stressful time anyway for most people. But when my dad died, that made Christmas sort of be more opaque, a little bit less enjoyable than it was. So my idea of getting married on that time was to make Christmas again a happy time instead of a sad time. And yes, I miss my dad, but I know that it was his time to go to a better life. And so you have to understand that, and you have to come to the point where you know that life is that way. You're born, you go through life, and you die. And what's best for that situation is to remember the good times that you had together.
So this brings me to one of my biggest life lessons that you've taught me, which is keep the faith. Even when everything is going wrong, keep the faith. Now, we're going to jump through your timeline a little bit, because I feel like there's plenty of things that happen that are good after this moment that we just talked about. Now you're working in DC public schools, you're a principal, and these are one of the things, this event is one of the things that has shaped me as a man my whole entire life. When I reach into my bag of never quit reasons, these are probably one of the reasons why I will never quit when it comes to anything that I have to do. So you're working for DC public schools. Quote unquote, you're laid off, but there's about 500 people in the DC area that's working for public schools that is getting laid or fired, essentially. You spend the next year not having a job, you send plenty of applications out, never get a reply. During this time, I'm still living with you. I think I'm still in high school. So every day I get to see your attitude. I get to see you wake up. I get to see you go to sleep. I get to see how you spend your days. I get to see your emotions. During this time, I never saw you falter. I never saw you get depressed. You woke up early every single day. You made the bed every single day. You sent your applications out every day. I never felt monetarily that we lost anything. Obviously, we didn't go and do extra things, but I never felt like we were in jeopardy of losing the house and or not having food, etc., things like that. Now, I say all these things to say this. What is it about that situation that did not allow you to quit?
That was a very difficult time as well, okay, for me. But it again, remember that the military taught me not to give in. Situation is hard, but you don't let the situation handle you. You handle the situation. And the situation in this case is to get a new job. Yes, you had to administer your finances a little bit better because you don't have the income that you had. But if you settle down and look at the world in a logical way and do the steps in this case, as you mentioned, was to put in the day, looking for a new place to go to, and connecting with people, working things out. That's all of the things that I was taught in the military. Work things out. See how you can make a bad situation work for you. And so, yeah, the time that I was without work was difficult. But again, I knew at some point in time there was something that was gonna break. I just had to work at it enough to get the word out and create a network of people working for me to get the next level of work. And it worked out, so I went on with that. It's almost, it almost makes me a little bit stronger than I was before to continue on with what I had to do.
What would advice you would have for anyone that's in a similar situation or feeling like they failed or whatever?
Failure is it's a fact of life. There's always something that doesn't go exactly as you planned, but in that failure, you can actually find something that maybe it isn't necessary for you to go into a different direction. I've had, for example, I've been working since I was 8. And one of the first jobs that I had was working in a print shop. And I don't mean a print shop like you see today, where you have computers and stuff like that. This is a print shop where you have to actually set the setting, the types into a little block. And you had this machine that comes down metal to metal. And you have to stick your hand in there, put paper to paper to do a print. I learned that really well. I did it for a long time. And then I went on to do something else. But that job disappeared. So looking at that, I said to myself, you know, what happened to those people that did that? Those people had to retool themselves to do something else. But the mentality has to be there to be able to do that. And my advice to people is that to remember that it don't matter what stage of your life you're in, you can always go into a different direction. All you have to do is give of yourself so that you don't get depressed, okay? And that means maybe consulting with people, sharing with people how you're feeling, letting them help you. Again, there's always somebody in society who can help you. There's somebody, a friend, it could be a neighbor. Remember that you're a hero to somebody. That's one of the things that I actually had mentioned to you, but I don't know if you remember that, but that there's always somebody looking at you. You have somebody that you're a hero to. I have people that maybe I'm a hero to, I don't know.
You're a hero to me.
But the whole idea is that you're a hero to someone, and the way you behave is being observed by that person. So if you behave badly, that person's going to be, again, disappointed and behave badly. So you have to be able to be on your best behavior, if you want to call it that. But that comes from friends. That comes from talking to people, to share with people. again, it is that love from people and that sharing that makes you come through. I don't have a formula. I can't give it to you in a can formula. But the whole idea is that if you remember that you're somebody's hero, then as a hero, you act as a hero. And that makes it come through.
I like that answer. So we're going to skip further up into your timeline, all right? So you lose your mother. I want to talk about this because this is totally different from losing your father, on top of the fact that we spend a lot of time talking about male stuff. So I want to get a perspective of how your mother affected you or impacted you as a man and as a human being altogether.
Yeah. My mom was a very unique person. She had, again, our family was very, very poor. She had, again, also a third grade education. She didn't go beyond the third grade. And most of her life, she actually worked for people as a housekeeper. But one of the things that kind of shines out for me, and this says a lot about my mom. We lived in a place where we lived on top of a hill, and the school was at the bottom of the hill. And I had just acquired a leg that was unable to walk on. I wasn't able to walk on one of my legs. And so she had to carry me to school in a wagon, a little wagon cart with a handle. You pulled it, and I sat on the bed of the and she pulled the wagon. And she, every day, for about a year, she would take me down the hill, which was not as easy, but then she'd carry me up the hill on that cart every single day. And every single day, she was there early in the morning when she came, and when school was out, my mom was out there with a little wagon. She'd take me from the seat, carry me out to the wagon, carry me out, talking to me. She stayed with me when, doing homework. She stayed with me. She taught me how to read, even though, again, she had only third grade. But she knew a lot, and she was sharing with me because as a housekeeper, she actually did that for the kids of people that she worked with. So even though she didn't have the school, she had the school by doing that and getting the information from them. And she was sharing that with me. But going to the differences between my dad and my mom, one of the things that happens is that my mom died. She died in Florida in a hospital during the pandemic. And they would not allow me to see her. And in fact, when she died, it was prohibited for me to see her. And it was a very hard situation because what they were doing with the cadavers were they're just cremating them, putting them away. And so I actually paid somebody to allow me to see my mom, even though that was prohibited. But I was only able to see her for a brief moment and not able to share with her. So I shared with my dad as he was dying, and we were able to say goodbye to each other. But I wasn't able to do that with my mom. So that made it a lot different. And so even today, I keep a picture of my mom in the living room. And when I see that picture, I always remember that I didn't have the opportunity to say goodbye. That's very hard. And it made it a lot different. But again, the one thing that carried me through, again, is you had asked me about my relationship with my kids. My daughter went to do the process of going with me to see my mom at the end. And my daughter was very substantial and a very key person in holding me while I was really down. And she helped me to sustain. And then coming home to you and to my wife, very supportive of that. But again, it was a very difficult time, very different from my dad. As I mentioned my dad died in December. I feel a lot better now that I'm married, And I use that to kind of lift that praise. But I don't think I could ever do that for my mom because she died in a different situation. And I just feel for those people whose mom was actually put away without them having to say goodbye. That's a difficult situation to handle. But again, it's love that handled that situation for me, from my son and my daughters to help me move up, and my wife to support me during that time. And this is why I talked about supporting each other during the times that the other person may be not available.
With all that said, were you able to get over the passing of your father?
You never get over that, but what you do is you reach a point where you accept that event, right? And you move on with beyond that. And that's one of the things that I've shared with you, I think, that, you know, always, whatever situation comes at you, you still have to move forward because life continues on. Life doesn't stop. And that's where I think the role of a father is very important. The role of my mother, the same way, but the role of the father is important because it's the task of that person to keep things moving forward as life continues, even after an event like a death or something else happening. And you always have to think that there is some light at the end of the tunnel, no matter how difficult the situation is. Life is difficult, but you have to handle it in a way that you can look and see even a shining pit, you know, like a little pin of a trace, that there is some light, and you have to go to that light. You have to search for that one point that actually will make things look a little different. And no matter what happens, no matter how difficult it is, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you look back, and that may even look insignificant. But now, it's 100%. It looks bigger than life. But realizing that at one point or another, that may not be that big. And it is for us to have the discipline and the strength to move through that.
I like that answer, thank you. This brings me to pretty much the end of, or current timeline of your life right now. You're in retirement. Looking back at your life, career, marriages, divorce, kids, everything that you experienced, what can you give to the audience as a life lesson after, was it 71 years of life, of being young?
Yeah, well, the whole idea is that life is short, but you have to enjoy it. You have to live life in a way that fulfills you. You have to communicate with others that live with you, that you love. Let them know that you love them, and let them know that you're there for any situation that they may need. Family's important. Again, I wasn't able to achieve that in my first marriage, but I think that at least I was able to achieve a tremendous and good, healthy relationship with my children throughout life. Again, my thing is to let them know, set a goal, work toward the goals, to the steps that lead you to that goal, and when you're getting close to that goal, just set another one and keep going that way. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and pretty soon you get to where you want to go. And never give up. Don't give in. It's hard to do, but it must be done. Life must continue on.
All right. So this brings me to my last life lesson of this episode, not the last life lesson that you've ever given me, but I will leave the audience with this. My life lesson that you taught me was, win or lose, I will always love you, my son. And with that, you told me that at the age of 8 or something like that. And at that time, it didn't really mean much, but the older that I got, it made more sense to me. And it allowed me to not have to find a restriction on whether or not, he's gonna love me, whether or not I fail or win or whatever it is. You told me that, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm always gonna strive to win. And I always want you to be the most proud of me, because I want you to know that everything that you've taught me, I've absorbed. And I wanna be able to give that to the rest of the world. And that is the reason why we are here today, and the reason why I've essentially created this YouTube channel is because I want people to not only find themselves in a situation where they don't see the light, but being able to have the power to bring themselves out of that darkness and find the self-righteousness that they're looking for and find the correct self-identity to be the winner that they want to be. With that said, if you'd like to see more long video content like this, please leave a comment, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, make sure that you're following everything that's on this YouTube channel. And stay strong, keep the faith, my alphas, and never give up.